Hi everyone, can everyone hear me? Yeah. All right, welcome to our panel on VR and education. I also have been entitling this in my head. It's not as dystopian as you think. We have some awesome panelists today, but before I go ahead and introduce everyone, I wanted to really kind of set the stage and think about how we're defining education. And so I wanted to move away from the idea of having a bunch of third graders sitting in chairs, you know, with their VR glasses on and being totally glazed out and not living in the real world, because that's not what we're talking about today. We are talking about third graders to a certain point, but we're also talking about a lot of other people as well, and a lot of other uses and definitions for education. So I wanted to broaden the definition to include professional development, instructors, coaches, therapists, and you can go on field trips, you can learn hard sciences. I wanted to talk about technical training, the training that doctors go through, military, aviation, museum tours, and college and university tours. I want to talk about distance learning, taking kids on to Verdun to see, the battle during World War II, or to signing of the Declaration of Independence. I wanted to talk about touring buildings before they're built, language learning, collaboration, all of these wonderful things that VR can bring to our large classroom of the world. So more than what may be written about VR and education right now. I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about how big the industry could be. So we've been reading a lot, and I'm sure you'll hear a lot over the next few days, that the market is expected to grow to be a $15.9 billion market by 2019. And they're expecting that the market for hardware, networks, software, and content will be a $200 billion market by 2020. And everybody is talking about VR and entertainment, and I actually think that the education market, especially as how broadly I just defined it, could be bigger than the entertainment market. And in my research that I was doing on these wonderful people on my panel and just in VR and education, it doesn't seem that there's enough written or there's enough in the news about VR and education and how big this market can actually be. So I think that this panel will actually broaden our minds, and we could actually have a very interesting discussion this afternoon. So the first thing that I wanted to do is introduce a few of the wonderful people on our stage. We're going to start right here on my right, so with Shauna. So Shauna is one of the founders of Clay Park VR, and she had spent a decent amount of time at Oculus as well. And Shauna, basically, she is very focused on introducing the mediums of 360 video, virtual reality into education and to other spaces. And each of the panelists will talk a little bit about what they're doing. So Shauna will have the chance to explain all of that to you. Right next to Shauna is Skip. Skip is the director for medical virtual reality at University of Southern California Institute for Creative Technologies, and a research professor with the USC Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at the Davis School. He also conducts research on design, development, and evaluation of VR. He's done some really remarkable things around the application of VR for combat and military trauma related to PTSD with service members and veterans. And I know that he has a presentation that he's going to show you, so we're very excited to see what Skip shows. Next to Skip, we actually have Pia. And Pia is standing in for Julian, but Pia is also Julian's partner at the Cult Collective, and Pia produces a number of projects on production on live action and animated 3D content. And so Pia will talk a little bit more about that. And then next to Pia, we have Brent. And Brent is the CEO of 2-Bit Circus, which is an experiential entertainment company. And he launched Steam Carnival, which is a modern reimagining of the Midway to inspire kids about science, technology, engineering, art, and math. So really cool people on stage who are doing cutting-edge stuff. So what we'd like to do, maybe we'll start with Skip, because you have a presentation.
Okay.
I'm going to take your chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate being invited here and get to share some of the work that we've done over the years. The area that I focus on is clinical applications of VR, but as you'll see, there's a lot of learning content that is involved in clinical applications, as you will see shortly. The work has been done since 1996. We actually got started during the nuclear winter of virtual reality when there was a lot of hope and vision, just like there is now, but the technology wasn't there to deliver on it. So consequently, VR kind of went under the radar. But there was still a lot of good things that you could do with it along the way, and incrementally technology got better. And I think that we're at a point now where technology has caught up with the vision. We can really do good stuff. And the neat thing is, at least in mental health, rehabilitation, and clinical areas, there's a good 20-year literature, scientific literature of findings that help guide us in what works, what doesn't work. And now we just need to kind of readapt it for the current ecosystem. So I work at ICT at the University of Southern California. I direct the medical VR lab, and over the last 20 years, we've developed applications that address sight problems, cognitive, motor, and we use virtual humans along the way. Let me just show a couple of quick clips.
شفت با نتیجه چقاول co? O! Co? Hey Rashida! Salam alaikum. Amerikayan راغلي.
You'll see a little more of that at the end, so I'm going to skip through that. That's what it looked like about 5-7 years ago. You can see the graphic improvement.
You have 1 minute to identify 2 targets.
What we did was once we had this giant simulation, we decided to test cognitive function, attention, memory, executive function, all within an immersive VR environment. We also have done tons of civilian applications. This is from 1997 with the lighting. You can't see it so well, but basically a 3D holographic projection display for testing and training visual spatial skills, in this case, mental rotation. This is what a child with ADHD sees in a head-mounted display as they turn their head and look around in a virtual classroom. Developed this one in '93 to test kids with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So the child has to pay attention to what's on the board, but meanwhile, common distractions in an everyday environment pop up. And a school bus turns up, you might have seen a kid throw a paper airplane, variety of things. So now we can begin to test and train cognitive functioning, particularly with attention, in an ecologically relevant environment, an environment where the behavior really is tested in the real world. Down here, teaching folks after a stroke or a traumatic brain injury or a spinal cord injury how to recover motor function. So there are a whole series of applications we developed using our own tracking systems, but as well the Kinect and the Intel sensors to track full body movement, and basically to make it so people can do physical rehab in their home and use commodity off-the-shelf devices at a low cost. We've also taken the area of virtual humans and taken it from military applications where perhaps negotiation training was done for the military. When I first saw that application at ICT, where you would practice with an Afghan warlord how to negotiate, I thought, well, therapy's a negotiation. What about virtual patients? So here's something from 2012 showing a social worker in training interacting with a virtual military patient on a suicide assessment.
Good afternoon, Sergeant. What brings you in today?
Well, my wife told me she thought I should talk to someone. She's been pretty concerned about me since a soldier suicided on base last week.
Did you happen to know the soldier?
Yes. friend, but I met the Marine once or twice. He seemed normal at the time. I guess he's afraid of my head again.
Do you have any plans for yourself?
No. It's certainly not my mind, especially I should be all stuff. Sometimes I can't handle it.
So basically, in that case, a novice clinician can screw up a bunch with a virtual patient before they get their hands on a live one. Taking that same kind of AI, natural language processing technology, and putting it online for virtual coaching. This is one, again, in a military context, for service members, veterans, and their families who are hesitant to talk to a live provider. They don't know if they have a problem, but they can get information and they can talk to this character, learn about PTSD, do some light self-assessment, get information about where to seek help. I'll let him introduce himself real quick.
Well, I'm not a real person, Dr. Chapter, but I'm based on the personality and experiences of real soldiers and Marines. I'm still just a piece of software, but I'm getting better all the time, so hopefully I can be a helpful piece of software to talk.
So I hope you get that, while there's a clinical focus here, these things can be marshaled for educational purposes. A tutor, an educational agent that you can work with that is a positive teaching agent, a variety of purposes that could be translated to that area. And the technology gets better. Last year, we've developed a system for developing a toolkit. Has a variety of patients, a variety of backdrops that you can put them in, whether it's a clinical setting of a doctor's office, a psychologist's office. And basically, we've developed a library of 40 different diverse characters. And the model here is very simple for education. Going from medical ed, the old saying about see one, do one, teach one, to now trials to criteria and success on doing clinical interviewing, which is important because we know medical errors and poor history taking lead to a lot of problems in the healthcare system. Also, taking the same kind of technology for special needs, you can see a variety of things, like taking the virtual human technology and then translating it for kids with high-functioning autism, actually teenagers and young adults. Developed this project. You've got 6 different characters, 8 different backdrops. Each character can be more and more provocative to train job interviewing skills. And so, that's data from the first pilot study showing progressive improvements over time in job interviewing. So that's one. Let me just show an example here where a soft touch interviewer.
I'm glad you're here. In a minute, we'll get into some questions about the job. But before we do, why don't you just tell me about yourself?
Now we changed the character, changed the backdrop.
This is an entry-level position. I guarantee there will be things you won't like about this job. That said, what's the most important thing you think you're looking for in a job?
So we built this for high-functioning autism, but as it turns out, we're using it at US Vets downtown that takes care of really impoverished veterans, helping them learn job interview skills, as well as the Long Beach VA, and we're hoping to roll it out to a wider population. So all these things fall into the idea that VR is a simulation technology. Basically, a controlled stimulus environment, we're just like an aircraft simulator, test and trains piloting ability. We can test, train, teach, and treat a wide range of human function. And in some sense, it's the ultimate Skinner box. I want to close with just a little detail on the PTSD work, because in some sense, it operates from a learning theory perspective, helping people confront very difficult emotional situations that happened to them in the past so they can get past it and move forward. And here is just a little clip, and then I'll end it.
BrainMind is a form of virtual reality exposure therapy that combines video game-based simulations with one of the most widely used evidence-based therapies. Making use of the University of Southern California Institute for Creative Technologies expertise in immersive technologies and emotional storytelling, BrainMind is a treatment option with appeal for today's digital generation. BrainMind gradually recreates trauma-relevant scenarios that clinicians can use to help patients confront and process difficult memories in a safe and supportive environment.
When I go through the day, I can start going through my head at night when I'm trying to sleep, or when I'm with my wife, and times I don't want to come out of
So with that, positive data, just real quick, data. We actually do science here, showing decreases in PTSD symptoms. Here, in this one trial, individual data points, 16 no longer met PTSD criteria. Out of the 24 did not benefit. So, there's a lot of science to be done. If you're interested in more, there's a conference that we're having in LA on VR for clinical applications. And with that, thank you.
Thanks, Skip. That was awesome. That was really amazing. We will continue with each of the panelists talking a little bit about the awesome work that they're doing. So, Shauna, you're up next.
Great. I can just stay here. Hi. Is this on?
It's on now.
Okay. Let's see. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. So hi. Thanks again for having us all here today. It's been really exciting. My name is Shauna Heller, and I'm the founder of Clay Park VR. I established Clay Park about 6 months ago as a VR strategy and advisory service for corporations, brands, and institutions trying to find a meaningful way into virtual reality and other immersive technologies. I come by the experience pretty legitimately. I spent over a year and a half at Oculus, working as their developer relations specialist, managing non-gaming, non-entertainment VR development. And so it was a really exciting time to be there to just see all of the different verticals that were opening up to VR across arts and culture, automotive, architecture, aerospace, advertising and marketing, of course, but also medicine and education and science over into theme parks and themed entertainment. So the reason that I ended up at Oculus and the work that I'm doing here now is that since 2009, I've worked as a business development executive for small creative technology companies, interactive and immersive technologies, right back here in Los Angeles, in fact. And I worked across a multitude of entertainment stakeholders, from previs and visual effects and animation to motion capture, performance capture, augmented reality, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and then again over to theme parks and themed entertainment. So it all really blended together. And something that had always been very compelling to me about the use of these technologies, whether it was the content side or the hardware side, was the ability to use it as a tool, use it as something that facilitates a change, or whether it's a level of engagement. But so anyway, that was why I ended up at Oculus, because I kind of spoke a broad set of languages across many different business verticals. So I understood how, someone over in the architecture industry was trying to use a DK1 and then a DK2. And I understood what someone over in the education vertical, if you can call it that, it's like the future. But in the education vertical, I could understand why they were so compelled to start putting the hardware or headsets in little beta programs and pilots, and then being able to help all of those people talk to one another and understand from a platform side how a platform thinks, and from a content creator's perspective how that person thinks, and then how the person at the institution or the corporation or the company is also thinking about it. So I kind of sat in the middle and helped everybody talk. And it was really exciting work, and I felt the best way to make a lasting impact was to step out from Oculus and form Clay Park. So Clay Park, VR strategy and advisory service for corporations, brands, and institutions. In many instances, I'm also serving as a independent executive director on special VR, AR initiatives that say you have a company that wants to try something new, or even say an education institution that wants to try something with virtual reality, but they're not quite sure how to proceed, and they read a lot and they do all this Googling and they become very overwhelmed and they think, I have to find a developer, I have to find a purpose, I have to find all of these things, and then they tend to find me. And I try to simplify that process for them and become kind of the key stakeholder that brings everyone to the table, straps them into a chair, and gets a project off the ground. It's super fulfilling. I feel like it is a decade's worth of the work that I have done previously coming together to be able to support all of this really exciting development in VR and AR. And unfortunately, I can't talk about the initiatives that I'm currently involved with, but I will be soon. And there are things that I can share, and this is a great panel for it as well, just in terms of things to watch out for and kind of help people prepare for it. But so that's the general sense of it. And I would like to add, and I think it helped my understanding a little bit better, but when we think about the term education, really education is about sharing knowledge, whether you're teaching, a teacher sharing knowledge with a student or a parent sharing knowledge with a child. It is, I think if we kind of let go of the word education and thought of it as sharing knowledge, and I think all of us up here on the panel would agree that really one of the most important aspects of VR and AR and all these immersive technologies is their ability to share experience. And so very slowly, I think there's going to be this shift where education becomes a de-emphasized word, and the word experience will start to rise a little bit more. So, thank you for having me.
Thank you. That's really interesting, and your work is really necessary, I think, for where we're headed. So, thank you.
It feels that way.
Okay, Pia, you're up next.
Could I
Sure,
try my
yeah.
microphone? Okay. Not letting me plug it in. I'm just gonna open it.
Sure.
You want me to get mine out of the way?
Sure.
Maybe I'll go while, in the interest of everybody's time here, while she's getting set up. So hi folks, my name is Brent Bushnell. I run a high-tech circus. We're a big band of nerds in downtown LA called 2-Bit Circus. We got our start basically making a bunch of interactive games, almost like a Cirque du Soleil for games, and would do huge parties and events for Amazon and Intel and the Super Bowl. And what started to happen was we were getting these calls from parents and teachers saying, hey, that stuff's really awesome. You guys are nerds, but this is not traditional sort of nerd stuff. And our kids find it really exciting. This is kind of a alternate way to get folks excited about science and engineering. So after doing hundreds of other people's events, we said, hey, let's do our own event. And rather than use the sort of standard term that everybody uses to associate with science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM, if you know that term, generally it's a politician or an educator talking about sort of our need for more of those, kids trained with those skills. And we don't graduate enough of them. And so we thought, well, STEM is okay, but STEAM is so much more awesome. You add in the arts, that brings the creativity and the fun and the excitement, and that was sort of what we felt was really lacking from those STEM disciplines. So if we could hijack what kids already love, music and fashion and games and fun, in order to be able to sort of deliver that core learning. And so a lot of the format of our carnival is one half all that high-tech entertainment, and one half a bunch of hands-on projects that pull back the curtain so kids can play with programming and electronics and fabrication. And VR has been a critical piece of that. We, years ago, built our own 360 cameras and wrote our own stitching software so that we could capture experiences in full 360. And proceeded to do that for IndyCar and the NFL and the NBA, so you could feel what it was like to be one of those athletes. And then put the kids through it so that they could feel sort of, hey, wow, isn't this cool? This is a sports thing. And then say, hey, you can do this now too. These cameras are getting really accessible. We actually just got a hold of Google's Jump camera, which if you haven't played with that, their stitching is incredible. Stitching, the post-production on 360 video content is a nightmare. And Google and GoPro have automated that with software in a really just absolutely magical way. So our focus was to say, hey, where's the fun? Let's capture that wonderful experience and then give them the tools to be able to do it themselves. I'll maybe close as Pia gets going here with, it's such the Wild West with VR right now. It's so exciting. And you go to a conference, and every single time you go to a VR conference, there is some new approach. It almost feels like computing in the 70s. Nobody knew what a computer was supposed to look like in the 70s, right? And so people were experimenting with all sorts of different interfaces. And as you all know, we've sort of standardized on a keyboard and a mouse and Windows and a sort of pretty standard format, whether you're talking about Linux or Windows or Mac. But back then, nobody knew, and they were exploring lots of different types of approaches for VR. I mean, I've sat in a electric chair and felt that experience. I did a multi-role virtual reality dinner So, I mean, just unpack that for a second. It was a multi-person, like 5-person dinner where and the artist was like, pick a role, mom, dad, oldest son, youngest son, or his new girlfriend. And he's like, try to be somebody you're not. And so I was like, well, okay, great, I'll be the mom. And sure enough, I looked down and I'm pregnant and, in a dress. I was like, I'm never gonna get to feel like that, And so it was really a powerful way to sort of transport you into another space. And the part that was the most fascinating was the 5 of us all watched this 12-minute experience, took our headsets off, and in order to get the complete narrative, we all had to trade notes. The dad had gotten up in the middle of the dinner and gone downstairs. Well, we didn't see that. We were still sitting at the table, and they didn't know that I was pregnant, but were giving me a really hard time for not drinking or whatever it was, And so there was it encouraged all this interesting dialogue afterwards, and it was a style of storytelling you could not have done in any other medium, And so it was really a powerful thing. So I would encourage you to just, think about and explore lots of different approaches for this stuff, because it really, nobody knows right now. And Chris Milk said it the best. We've spent 100 years developing the grammar of storytelling in 2D. You think about a film, long shots and tracking shots and panning and whatever. In VR, we don't know what that grammar looks like right now. We've got a lot of experiments, but you do a bad job and people are going to throw up. The stakes are just higher this time. And so there's really a lot of ways to look at this stuff. I'll maybe close one other thing. There's a great game called Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. And I think this is a style of entertainment that's incredible, because in this game, one person is in VR and everybody else is not in VR. What they have is a manual for a bomb. The person in VR is looking at the bomb. Now, in order to accomplish this game, you've got to communicate. If I'm in VR, I've got to tell you guys the nature of the bomb. You're looking at the manual and having to figure out the bomb. Well, now, this style could apply to so many different things, the best of which being training and learning and a lot of the kind of work you're doing, Skip, where this is both social and communication oriented as much as it is learning and as much as it is the entertainment side. So anyway, it's a very exciting time to be exploring this space. So thanks.
Thanks, Brent. Okay, now off to Pia.
Thank you. It's very interesting. My name is Pia Lindström, and I am here instead of Julian Sarmiento, who is the creative director of Digital Domain. And Julian and I are actually partners in a company called Crafted Imagination. So Code Collective is the company that I work with right now. I just wanted to clarify because it was last minute, so I'm sure that people didn't know. Thank you for coming, and I'm so happy to see a lot of women here, because that's always one of the things that I don't get to see a lot, and I'm excited that the panel is actually more women than men, which is very unusual. So I work in a couple different areas. My fields of interest is natural user interfaces, NUIs, virtual environment, which is the VES environment, also virtual reality, VR, augmented reality, AR, mixed reality, MR, the effects of level of fidelity in VR and AR. I also work in the usability evaluation, also in the human-computer interaction, which is the HCI, and the visualization of it. And the application domains that I work with, and in a couple areas that I'm looking in is educational things, but also we work and dabble also in industries in like the architecture, construction, history, mining, civil engineering, entertainment, training, which is the simulation, and then of course serious games, visual analytics, and robotics. My background, I've worked in a few different areas. I worked for a robotics company that's owned by Google called Bot and Dolly, or Autofus, which is Google Robotics right now, and I worked in that, one of the few people who were working in robotics at the time, because I was one of those girls who actually liked Transformers and fun things like that, so that was like my dream when I grew up. I also worked with Red Cinematic Studios, Red Digital Camera, with Jim and Jared, and I was super excited about digital cameras. 4K, 6K for me was just like, wow, it's amazing to see those type of formats. When typically in VR right now you're seeing 1080, which is the speed that we're seeing. I also work in a couple different areas, which I'm going to come to with education, but also I work in live action, and monoscopic and stereoscopic, and also animated 3D stereoscopic, which is probably one of the hardest things to do, especially if you're trying to do Pixar quality, where you have the field of depth, and also try to have color theory and try to understand like how it interacts with the brain and the mind. One of the things that we're really excited about right now is education with children, and there's so many different studies out there. For example, Mattel, I met with them with the Advanced Technology Division, and I'm sad to see that the gentleman didn't show up. But one of the things is that their new Viewmaster VR is launching now in September, and they're gearing it from 7 years old. Some studies say that the brain is not fully developed until 14, some are 18, some are 25. So they're asking what are the effects on the mind and your eyes, and especially in children, because you also want to make sure that you're protective of your child. Everything is in early stages. We're not sure yet, but there's many people who are saying it's not supposed to be done, and then other people are saying it's no problem. So I think that it also has to do with the quality of content that you're doing. For example, if you're shooting live action, or if you're shooting, for example, with motion sickness and education for that, you also want to make sure that when you naturally watch a piece of content, your line of sight is 10 degrees below what you naturally watch, and that's one of the reasons why we actually get sick, because you have to shoot your content 10 degrees below. And then also your mind can't comprehend more than 30 miles an hour. So if you're going in a roller coaster, like they just announced yesterday actually at I think Six Flags, it's 60 miles an hour, which means that they're probably gonna vomit. So those are one of the things that, since the field is relatively new in this type of area, when you come to content and education and things like that, you're gonna meet a lot of people who are learning this, and then there are other people who have been in the business for a long time. I've been in the VR business for about 3.5 years. Of course, virtual reality's been around for quite a long time in simulation and things like that, military operations. I think that we're very particular about making sure that education is produced in a way that that children or anyone who's watching it's done the correct way. Of course, we're learning, everyone is learning this, but it's in order to kind of get the realistic thing. So when you're watching, let's say, a little bit of a robotic movement or things like that, it's we haven't quite figured out something called volumetric capture. One of the top companies, I think right now, is 8i, and the reason why we can't really fully work with it is simply just because we don't have the processing speed, excuse me, to, excuse me, the processing speed to convert the amount of data that we're shooting. So for 8i, they have about 24-hour period to download the information. So that's why we can't, there's a really hard time, unless you're doing live monoscopic and you're streaming it, like NextVR, for example. But it's not stereoscopic yet. But in terms of education, and those are the type of things that we're going to need in order to have things that aren't pre-recorded or things that are not just programs, but in order for people to work, let's say you want to be able to teach, let's say someone in Ghana or someone that you're working with, let's say they want to see your class and you're trying to be more of an interactive experience. So for example, if you're working in the stereoscopic environment, ultimately you want to be able to use your haptics, which is the touch and feels, and also you want to try to feel like your bounce backs also. You want to make sure that when you're touching things, you want to try to feel things back. And you also want to make sure that that you can interact. So for example, if you mention something, or any of these amazing panelists, if they mention something that you want to learn more about, you also want to have the interactive part. A lot of the things that you're seeing now is called immersive or 360, but they're not things that you can't eye track with, so you can't like watch something for a second and then look with your eyeball, and then all of a sudden it can change a chapter, which is one of the things that you want to see with Mattel, for example. One of the things that I spy with my little eye, and then you can use the, and you can also have a movement, so you can follow the way that you watch and see and educate your students and things like that. So I think that specifically for kids, in order to kind of make sure that the space can advance, and we have already amazing teachers out there, we just want to make sure that you are now able to interact a little bit more with them. And also explain more complex concepts a little bit more in detail for college kids, for example. So, quantum entanglements or quantum physics in a more easier way. So sometimes kids can be maybe dreaming or drifting away a bit, and then this way they can kind of keep them focused. One of my, of course, fantasies is to kind of like, if you're in this environment, I'm hoping that ultimately it's going to become maybe more of a smart space, not a device. And you've seen some of the things that, I'm not sure if you've seen like the contact lenses that they're having now for AR and MR, but I'm thinking that maybe through light field technology, which is the volumetric capture, we'll somehow be able to interact more like Minority Report. So I think that we're in the beginning stages. Obviously, the processing speed of we need to be able to crack the quantum, basically in order to speed up our computers. It's kind of when we're going to evolve the next step. And we're really close. We have supercomputers, obviously, with the fastest one in the United States, I believe, is called a Night Chip by Intel. But we also have the fastest one right now, I believe, is in China. I can't remember the name of it, but I believe it's 35,000 active computers, and you're dealing with P-flops and F-flops, which is the kind of quantum power that you need to be able to do the type of advancement that you see. So right now, if you're seeing like in the VR space, like right now you're having this device here, but it's basically a phone, right, with sensors. That's why the semiconductor stock is going up, because it's all sensors. In the AR environment, in order to kind of do what you're seeing, and AR is the type of thing when you're seeing the see-through, when you can see things through, and the MR is where the space is more solid. And I think that the advancement for both MR and VR and AR for education across border in all verticals, as you guys were all talking about, including entertainment, and also more of an interactive experience for shopping or things like that, will advance. I would say in the next 10 years, you'll probably see a lot more things coming out. If you really like to do things a little bit more thorough for research, I also read patents, because it's exciting to kind of see like things that might be coming. Keep going to lectures like this, because it's very exciting to have lots of fun people like this coming. So thank you for having me, and it was great to meet you, Caroline.
Thank you. Great. So thank you, all the wonderful panelists. We're all doing really great work, as you heard, and so we have about half an hour. We're going to just talk about some really interesting topics on VR and education, and just share some thoughts. I'm also going to leave a little bit of time at the end for the audience to ask questions. So one of the first things that I wanted to talk about is how the brain works a bit, and I know Pia, you mentioned a little bit, and Skip, of course. Wanted to think about the notion of learning and how it won't feel rote anymore. We won't have to memorize. It'll feel like an experience. Like, what's actually happening, and what happens to, and what have you seen through your research or through even your experiences with even the entertainment-based experiences where people feel like they've actually experienced it? What is the good side and the bad side behind this, or where are you? If I'm just throwing this out there. How do you feel about people thinking that they've made memories and they're not actual memories, and how does this tie into learning? So,
Well, I mean, there's solid research around the more of your senses involved when you go to learn something, the better you're going to learn it. And so, you've probably been told that you should study for the test in the room in which you're going to take the test, right? That's not accidental, because you want to have as much of that environment at the time that you're going to be called on for that knowledge. And so with VR, you have a great opportunity to sort of have more of your senses engaged. We found we've done tons of activations with our content, and the more if you have a motion platform or wind in the face or the appropriate smells for that scene, not only do people enjoy it more, but fewer get sick. And the more you can convince the body, the problems with VR, Stan, when your proprioception, right, your awareness of your body in the world, disagrees with what your eyes are seeing. And so the more you can sort of minimize that, the better off it will be. Certain folks are just more sensitive to getting sick as a result. So I think we have in our brain mirror neurons so that we can watch somebody else do something and imagine ourselves doing it. The closer you can immerse someone in the environment in which they're going to be able to watch those experiences unfold, the better they're going to learn that, I think.
I was reading an article about a box where you have a VR experience, so it's kind of like true smell-o-vision, where you're smelling a fire. It's like
Right.
it was pretty amazing. People came out of that box pretty freaked out, I must say.
That is actually something that the entertainment industry has tried to solve for a long time, and it's really actually a hard problem, because you think about the number of things you see a day or the number of things you hear a day. It's in the millions or billions. I don't even know what number we would call that, but you probably only smell like 50 things a day, right? So you're really sensitive to that sense, and the challenge with a generic solution for smell-o-vision is, you eject something into the world, a little spout of smell to say represent a barbecue, and then a few moments later you eject something out that smells like motor oil, and then a little bit more it's going to be like a sweet shop. Well, the sad part is some of that's going to end up in your nose, that molecule, that smell molecule, but some of it's going to fall places, right? It's going to fall on the ground. It's going to fall on the carpet. And you allow that stuff to build up long enough, and you know what the aggregate smell is?
Yeah.
Basically vomit. So really, it's actually not accidental. If you've ever done flying over California at Disneyland, California Adventure,
Soarin'.
there's two smells: pine and orange, both of which are cleaning agents. And the ground there, not a carpet, but concrete. The seat is mesh. Getting smell right is non-trivial.
Yeah.
So-
We've actually used a smell machine, and we worked with Jackie Mori on some of this early on with a scent collar, but we use it with the PTSD exposure because we know that smell is intimately linked in the limbic system to memory and emotion. And we had a pretty high-end system where the scents would clear out, but it still is a lot of the challenges that you bring up. But we worked with nasty smells, rotting garbage, body odor, gunpowder, cordite, burning rubber, diesel, But some patients, as soon as that puff of smell came out, they were back there. So I agree that the multisensory approach is important. I also think we have to consider that there's a whole science around embodied cognition, the idea that, from the very earliest days of crawling around on the floor as a child, you're developing cognitive structures based on physical interaction in the world. This is what VR really affords, this naturalistic interaction. Mouse and keyboard, great for Word, PowerPoint building, but not for the deep level of learning that draws on that embodied cognition. The second thing, I think, to add to the multisensory embodied cognition is the use of narrative. The idea that before there was a wheel, people were telling stories, and that's how knowledge was transferred. And so building immersive interactive narratives may be, and this fits right in with digital Hollywood here, may be something that we need to pay attention to in building learning environments.
Well, I think something to keep in mind for people out there considering how to start thinking about VR or thinking about VR is that our number one sense is actually sight. And then number two is hearing. So if you think about distance, right, you see the furthest and then you hear, and then that third priority is your sense of smell. And then the final one is your sense of touch. So if you're looking to start, considering creating content or creating an experience, if you want to prioritize just a little bit, just to keep it simple, it would be make sure your visuals you're sticking the landing on 90 frames a second or better there, and that you have really compelling spatial audio, 3D, and then you can start worrying about everything else. And the everything else is super important. Haptics, scent, fragrance, and all these things, they are important overall. But I think in these early days, where not every VR activation is going to be at a theme park and you're trying to mount something, purposeful or meaningful for your team or your company or whatever project you're working on, get the fundamentals down first, which is your visuals and then your audio, and then start thinking about haptics and scents. Just in case anyone's out there panicking that they have to go find the scent company, that will provide them 100 different samples of pine or orange. But start with something simple.
I also wanted to, I wanted to add also one of the things is that that Julian mentioned to me last night was, especially for children, the sense of false memories, that they're not able to kind of make the differentiation between what is real and what is not. And that's one of the things that we have to also be very thoughtful of when creating something for children, especially. I also, this is why I think the quality of content, when I'm talking about for me, VR basically is almost like seeing 3D about 15 years ago. The quality of the content that's kind of like there right now. We're seeing content now that is at 4K, including in live, which is very amazing and monoscopic. But I think one of the things to also make sure that your mind and your content is in line kind of with the parameters that we've been given so far, and I'm sure they will differ and people probably have different versions of this, but I would say if you're doing VR, especially in the 3D stereoscopic animations, or even in live stereo, I would say, not live stereo, live monoscopic, I would say keep your line of sight at 10 degrees, or exactly the way your eyes are watching a person. You're naturally watching 10 degrees below. So you want to make sure you shoot your content exactly that way. If you do it higher or lower, like if I put, let's say, Oculus here, you are going to get sick after a while because it's not how you watch content naturally, right? You're always watching it like this, a little bit below. I also would limit it to 17 minutes max, because that's what we've been told. Again, things might change, and also I wouldn't do it faster than 30 miles an hour, so I wouldn't recommend the Six Flags, but if you have a good stomach, then I would do that as well. So,
and I'd even go with 3 to 10 minutes. 17 is long.
It's for, let's say, professional surfers or so, but that's kind of where the range would be. And also when you're working with color theory, like why your mind and your eye is more susceptible to red or yellow or white or something. And also, if you're trying to create a storyline, you have usage of algorithms, but we can also create it more, like some of the things that we're doing now is to create like a theater. You guide your eye to the place of the theater where the action is being placed, like a Broadway theater. And then you move the way to the other side. And that way you can kind of create your storyline or movie.
And sorry,
easier.
wait, say that again. How do you do that?
So let's say you're imagining on Broadway. And so what we're trying now and doing actually is basically directing your eye to a piece of content that's more interactive in, let's say, on the left side of the theater.
And so how are you indicating it on the screen?
With different like indicators, like it could be a song, or it could be
audio or visual.
Yeah, or it
cues.
could be like a little bit light or a blinking or something.
So spatial audio, a sound happens over here, I'm going to look over
Yeah,
here.
and of course you have the 360, but we're trying not to get them over and under and things like that, and then kind of guide them. So like I Spy with my little eye, and then also we're dabbling also in 3 and 4D sounds right now. So I mean 3Ds, but 4D is relatively there. So again, all your senses, in order to know it's ultimately real, everything has to kind of work together, right? And that's, we are going to see the movement soon, as when we talk to science and entertainment and everything has to be fused together, and that's why we have these conferences, to make sure that we can talk, and you might have a good idea and we put it together.
One of the things I wanted to talk about is what are the benefits of a teacher or a clinician or whoever it is that's kind of running this project. As we see the classroom as a project, I used to work at Sesame Street, and we see each year as, we're going into our 45th experimental year, so I, kind of see the classroom as a project, and the teacher is running it. And so one of the great things about virtual reality is that the teacher can control the experience a bit. I know with the Google experience that the teacher is controlling through a tablet, but it's also that real-time data that they're getting in about each child and what the child is experiencing. And so I know, Skip, you showed a little bit, and I was wondering about with the PTSD and these soldiers who had been through these experiences, when they're hooked up to the to the VR machine, what is being monitored in the brain, and how deep can we get, and how do we know about what people are learning? How is that displayed?
There's basic measurements that you can take during therapy, and the easiest, of course, is self-report. So therapists would check in with the patient periodically every couple of minutes. What's your SUDS level, subjective units of discomfort, on a 1 to 100? So you get the self-report, but a lot of places also monitor heart rate, skin conductance, respiration, and that's another window into the soul. And the clinician can use that. Sometimes people want to be the stud and say, oh, I'm at a 10, out of 100, but really their heart rate's 1.5 over baseline. So then the therapist has to take note, and that also is clinical information. So, one of the beauties of VR, again, controlled stimulus environment, but where you can measure things in precise ways, knowing what the person is looking at that time, is a very important asset, I think. And I think a lot of the points here are really good, but you know what? We got to do research on this stuff. There's a lot of things going on. Like personally, I love the Google Expeditions concept, but I think Google Cardboard, that sucks. Let's be honest. It's a great entry. I'll never get a job at Google, sorry. But it's a great entry level tool, but you can't adjust the interocular. It's a one size fits all. Great introduction. Kindergartners can get a thrill like an old Viewmaster, like we were kids, and all that. But you got to have something at a little bit higher level where you can make adjustments for the comfort of the user and the interocular distance.
Google Plastic is coming.
Yeah. So, that's my thing. We had 100 years of human research in psychology about how people behave and interact in the real world. We need at least almost that much for how people behave and interact in the virtual world before we can really, do the great stuff.
100 years.
Not that much, maybe 20.
Pace, not race.
We could do it faster now.
I wanted to make one kind of circle back to the teachers, because I think that's something that either there can be confusion about it or people miscommunicate or whatever, that the greatest strength of virtual reality and all of these immersive technologies and engagement technologies come from the fact that teachers are involved in the process of creating them. These are not a replacement for teachers. These are not that these technologies are a supplement, and that teachers will already are becoming the creative directors on these projects. And the beauty of consumer grade, less expensive headsets and the ability to create content, which is still very expensive and it's going to, get less over time. We're, on a slightly longer timeline for all that. But that teachers will become the creative directors. They hold the knowledge of how a child thinks, right? On levels that we're still trying to figure out how to measure. And it's super critical because I think that there is some sort of hesitation on some teacher side thinking, well, this is just going to replace me. And it's like the exact opposite. They hold the most valuable information to our students.
I think that is such an important point. I had it written down as here as well. I just wanted to talk about that a little bit, about getting new teachers interested. What does today's teacher have to think about, as new technologies enter the classroom? What should they be studying in school? Do we need teachers, if you're going to be, teaching elementary ed, do you also should you go to film school?
There's a U.S. Department of Labor statistic. 65% of elementary kids today are going to be in a job that doesn't yet exist.
Yes.
What? I mean, that's nuts, right? And so I think that it really means we got to reimagine school, right? It's not that you're going to now go and be in one career for the rest of your life. We really need creative thinkers who are going to basically learn on the job and continue to learn as they get out of school. And so I think we really need to think about tool use and how to just understand
continuous education. Yeah.
I think, it's sort of like the same thing in the clinical field. A lot of times people say, oh, you're using this technology, you're going to try to replace clinicians, you're putting a barrier between the patient. Same thing with teachers. There's that worry that they're being replaced, or there's some barrier between the pupil and the student because of the technology. The exact opposite happens. It's an empowering tool. It's a tool that, instead of a teacher having to labor drawing on a whiteboard atomic structure of carbon, all of a sudden a child can navigate that. When I think about how I learned the anatomy of the brain, it was 2D line drawings with a starfish thing for a structure, a seahorse for the hippocampus. Jesus Christ, that sucked. Now I can fly through the brain. I can see it in 3D. I can make a game out of it. And teachers will love it as long as the teacher is the one driving the learning. Where here's an exercise, just like when we were in school and it's like, we're going to see a movie today. Oh, everybody was excited. It was like the day off, Well, now you can have 3 or 4 5-minute movies in the course of a class session where child gets inspired, engaged, sees things that they couldn't see before, and then the teacher can dig in with an engaged student. And, as much visualization, but as much engagement happens there.
And on the tail of that, the need for creativity is more in the classroom is more acute than it's ever been, because imagine that the kid has just come into the room and watched and played a video game that had like $100 million budget, watched an advertisement that had like a $10 million budget,
right.
And now we're going to put like chalk on a chalkboard, right? I mean, that is ridiculous. And so expect that they're going to be engaged.
And the beauty of a Minecraft versus a Pac-Man, right? Exactly. Minecraft teaches thinking. Pac-Man teaches joystick control. I don't know, but it's where I think also communicating to teachers and to everyone. And I talk a lot about this, but VR and these immersive technologies, they can be a toy or they can be a tool. And I'm not saying they have to be one or the other, but fundamentally, you're either using this for entertainment or you're using it for productivity or to solve a problem or share knowledge or save a life. That if teachers are thinking, this is just one more technology that's going to compete for the attention of my student in my classroom. We already got rid of the cell phones and the iPads and this, that, and the other. That really, no, this is a tool for learning.
Right.
So that'll be kind of a distinction.
Could I just add one? Did you have a question or?
Yeah, actually, so we say that VR is not going to replace the teachers, but education becoming more and more affordable, a lot of the kids aren't getting access at all to any quality education. So, in some way, it has to replace the absence of education.
Mm-hmm.
Even here in America, but especially around the world. So, can we speak a little about that? Like, what the education would look like in some way with no teachers or with very little teachers?
Could I just, yeah, so I'm from Sweden, by the way, so I actually come from a different country. So To get to your question, I think that the education as technology advances is now going to probably become more accessible and also cheaper, because you're getting things like right now you have even MIT and Harvard and all those, they're offering free courses. I mean, Stanford, if you make, I believe, I'm not sure if they still have it, $125,000 or less for your family, then you go for free. That was at least 2 years ago, so I'm not sure if they still offer it. So there's a lot of programs like that. In my country, the education is free, but I believe that one of the great things about the advancement of the technology, virtual and AR and MR as a whole, I see that you have to learn a little bit more, but doesn't mean you have to code, and you need to, there's so many things and it's so confusing, and even for me, and I'm sure, I don't know for you guys, but there's a lot of things there that we're learning, and do you need to know quantum physics? Do you know STEM is kind of the educational programs that people are kind of pushing right now for kids, but also if you can realize that the further the technology advances in VR, the more power the teacher has, because you are going to be able to have access to so much more information and that are basically free. As it's kind of like content 1986, and like getting the VCR was probably $2,000, and let's say in 10 years it's going to be free. Like there's a ton of things on YouTube, it's going to be the same, and there is actually 360 experience on YouTube now for free. But I think this will enable us to get a lot more affordable, if not free, education around the world and to places that we've never had access to before. So I think that's one of the greatest things about virtual reality and AR as a whole.
So, circling back to your question, is VR education better than no education? Is that, like, to use it for distance learning, remote learning, virtual classroom, and whatnot? One of the pathways for VR and this whole line of engagement technology and immersive technology is to be able to scale it, right? Like you can have a student who feels like they are in a classroom of one, getting a one-on-one education from a teacher, but in fact that teacher is a scaled model. It's still a real teacher with real lessons and experience and knowledge to share, but now that can be scaled across 1,000 students. And I think, are you referring to that one-on-one interaction that is as valuable to a teacher-student interaction?
No, I'm just seeing, because I'm also from the European Union, and I grew up with free education, and yet now, my little brother and little sisters already going in a private school. So the trajectory I'm seeing is that education is, the traditional education is becoming more and more expensive, and so the alternatives and alternative access to good education is becoming these online schools. And so I'm looking where VR education and learning could go with less and less actual teacher, yet still we could aim for the same quality with much larger accessibility. What those interfaces could look like, and just your ideas on that.
Artificial intelligence and deep learning will probably inform a great deal of that research in the very near future. A very near future. We are already introducing artificial intelligence into our chatbots and into our customer service and all of, well, one and the same. That if we're able to gather as much data and metrics as we think we can in virtual reality, whether it's gaze and whatnot, but you'll be able to take that data and begin to build out a longitudinal study where we are understanding better than ever how students learn, which means that we can tailor an education directly to them. And then, basically, we will have a component of that teaching that is lifelike artificial intelligence representation. But I think that's a good ways off. And I think, again, the message is that, teachers, real teachers, are super fundamental to all of to this transition phase of learning and using virtual reality and immersive technologies. What do you think?
I think that what we'll see is in the next 5 to 10 years, everybody will have a virtual human personal learning assistant, or just like the Echo system that
The Diamond Age?
Yeah. But you'll have your own personal agent, and the teacher will be able to program certain content. And think about how many times were you afraid to ask a question in class about something important because you didn't want to appear dumb to the teacher or your peers. But you can ask in private your virtual personal mentor or trainer. And you have encyclopedic access to information online. And so it takes the stigma off of asking questions and doing things that you're not going to have one-on-one. We're not replacing teachers, we're amplifying the effect of a teacher. We're filling gaps where there isn't any teacher available. Teachers are overwhelmed. And so if we can get it right to be able to deliver things that kids want to interact with outside of the classroom, make it game-like, make it interesting, arouse curiosity, we may be able to extend out how much people can learn, not just kids, but lifelong learning.
I just wanted to to feed off of Brent for a second. Actually, to see where things are going, sometimes it's best, to read some books that, some sci-fi. And there's been some really great stuff that's come out. Of course, Diamond Age, but The Circle and also Feed, which are also amazing books that will kind of give you some insight as to where this technology is headed.
Looks like you've treated a number of different psychological ailments, and that's really admirable. And if you could solve anything with VR, what do you hope that amazing application would be that hasn't gotten there yet?
I think there's interest. One of the biggest mental health conditions right now is depression, and consequent possibility for suicide and all that. And there's some primordial work being done where they put you in the role, you take a depressed person, put them in the role of an adult, and there's a child in the virtual environment that is inconsolable, very upset. And so the user, the depressed person, they're instructed to try to soothe the child. After they do that for a couple minutes, all of a sudden they transfer the viewpoint to the child, and now you see the adult soothing, with the voice of the depressed person, soothing the child, and now you're receiving it as a child. All of a sudden they're finding out in 3 half-hour sessions that only 15 patients, all showing meaningful gains in improving their outlook and improving depression. 5 that were significantly improved just from this one simple intervention. So I don't know what the answer is, but I think depression is one of the largest areas that people are afflicted by. But I think as an amplifier for people with disabilities to get access to interaction and content, there's a giant amount of work. I'd be really hard pressed to pick the best one, but I think depression, because that is a global mental health condition that really is problematic.
1 in 4, I think, Americans suffer from depression.
Really high. So, and anxiety disorder. A lot to pick from. And I think we're at just the beginning stage, Model T stage. We've got 20 years of research that is encouraging, but now we've got the technology and it's low cost. We're going to see an explosion in this research.
And I wanted to just, for your also, DARPA has a program that they're starting to test right now. It's called RENET, and it's the Reliable Neurological Interface Technology, where they are using virtual reality and also something called a stent road, where they're basically implanting a chip into a sheep. Ultimately, it will be in some sort of human, obviously, when we get to that point. But they're using virtual reality to teach the brain, and then sending signals into this chip to kind of basically reprogram the brain to stimulate it in a more with a stimuli. So it's called RENET, RE-NET by DARPA.
We have time for one more question, if anybody has a pressing question in the audience. Yep.
for me, I think there's a little bit of a misconception around how hard the tools are, right? There was a time when computer vision and microcontrollers were a total pain in the butt, and they needed a team of 10 PhDs to do anything meaningful. But now those tools are getting so much more accessible that really there's a little bit of a rebranding that needs to happen around, you know, the possible, you know, what's possible with desktop fabrication and CAD. You know, I mean, your 6-year-old can do CAD in the web browser. You know, I mean, that is so far from, you know, opening up SolidWorks and doing really hard CAD design. And so I think that both for the student and for the teacher, the assumption that these tools are difficult and are going to take some specialist needs to be kind of blown out of the water, because they really have never been better. So that's, I'm not sure if that starts to get at your question.
I'll take a quick shot. I think that, you know, transforming teaching from, you know, one disseminator of information and 30 receptacles is going to be gone. The idea you're talking about, where the youngins can teach a teacher something, that's a collaborative discovery, problem-solving exercise. And I think if you build these virtual sandbox exercises, all of a sudden the child can point out a different solution or some novel information to a teacher, and all of a sudden, you know, something different emerges. I think that's a great vision for how this stuff should go.
Another format I really like is the flipped learning model, where instead of, you know, teacher broadcasts at the classroom and then you go back home and you do your homework. Instead, what if you just watch the video of the teacher at home and you do your homework at school? And so the thing that gets really neat about that is now everybody's doing their work. The teacher can act as exception handler, right? Oh, hey, teacher, I don't know what's going on. The teacher can now get that sort of one-on-one time. But what's better, as your class stratifies and you have the kids who know what's going on and the kids who don't, the experienced kids can then act as mentors for the younger kids. That's a good point.
And just to finish this up, one of the things that is happening, of course, is that things are going to get so much easier to do. One of the things that we're working on is basically a collaborative platform. So think about like having kids basically drop almost like PowerPoint content and being able to use the pieces of content and build their own virtual worlds or their own virtual space. So kind of engage, and that's, I think, ultimately what's going to happen. Just like we have PowerPoint or we have Instagram, or everything will just get simpler and easier. So, yeah.
With that note, we want to thank our panelists. They're doing amazing work, and we'll continue to, I guess, hear more about you guys. But thank you for being here and sharing all your ideas and helping us think innovatively about classroom education in the future. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for coming.